Just introduce yourself and ask the question. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jerry Smisi. I'm covering this event from Long Island Jewish World. Foreign involvement, how would they look on further involvement on the scale of Afghanistan or Iraq? Since the Middle East doesn't seem to be settling at all, you know, obviously in light of what happened at the embassy with 4 deaths of people.
And first off, we made the exact right decision to get out of Iraq. Actually, in my view, the decision to go into Iraq is one of the greatest foreign policy miscalculations this country's ever made. And I also believe the decision to withdraw our troops on a fixed timeline from Afghanistan is the exact right decision to make. We went there for a purpose. We have accomplished that purpose, and it's now time to bring our troops home, in my opinion. Now, the greatest threat to the Middle East, to our principal ally in the Middle East, that is to say Israel, and frankly to our own safety and security, is the nuclear ambitions of Iran. My own view is that the path we are on now, which is a combination of coercive diplomacy and crippling economic sanctions, is the right path for us to be on, and it is beginning to take hold. You all know that the currency in Iran has been devalued. You all know that they are dealing with runaway inflation. The oil embargo is starting to hurt. The banking embargo is starting to hurt. The European Union just announced yesterday escalation of those sanctions because Iran essentially refuses to join the community of nations. So I think that that's working. I think that we should contemplate a boots on the ground strategy in Iran as the very, 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 very last alternative. Have I made myself clear? We ought not to be engaging in military intervention or what's referred to as a surgical strike unless there is no other alternative, and we have completely exhausted every other alternative. I say that for 2 reasons. One, a surgical strike is nonsense. Okay? The Pentagon has war-gamed a surgical strike. There is no such thing as a surgical strike that will not immediately lead to a broader conflict in the Middle East that will involve us. And the second is that our armed forces are exhausted. Any of you who have spent time with any of the troops coming back from Iraq or Afghanistan after multiple deployments, spent time with their families as I have, they are exhausted. So leave aside the fiscal implication. Wars are fought by human beings. And we have placed enormous stress on the human beings who are those who wear our uniform and protect our country, and we have to deploy them as the very last resort.
You know, I think I agree with much of what Congressman Bishop said. I do think it's time to bring our soldiers home from Afghanistan. We may disagree a little bit in the timetable. I think we should do it as soon as possible. I'd be concerned about communicating that timetable to our enemies, but as soon as we can, we should get them home. I also agree, no question, our armed forces are exhausted, and I'm not a fan of nation building. I don't think that we have the financial resources to do that, nor do I think it's effective to go around in some of these countries around the world and try to push on them American democracy. They're just not ready and willing to accept it. I do think we have a fundamental problem, though, with the president, and this is not directed at Congressman Bishop, who I know has been supportive of Israel, but I think the president has been less than supportive of Israel, and that has had negative repercussions and has not helped the situation at all. And it is, you know, concerning when the president can't meet with Netanyahu, but he goes on The View. And I think the overall posture of the administration towards Israel has not been sufficient and has not communicated across the world about the special relationship that we enjoy. And from my perspective, Israel is one of our most important allies. And I say that not as somebody who has family in Israel, but as somebody who puts American security first and foremost. And for us, protecting and working with Israel is absolutely critical. I have not seen that the president cherishes that relationship and has often shown divisions amongst us between America and Israel very publicly, which just fuels what are potential enemies' efforts. I think we've had some missed opportunities in Iran. I also believe the military is the very last option. We should exhaust everything else we can do. It will not be acceptable to allow Iran to become nuclear. But we've had opportunities in the past which we failed to act on when there was the pink revolution, the uprising in Iran, where we should have at least covertly or even overtly aided the folks there for regime change. And at the end of the day, regime change is our best way of solving this problem. There's a large middle class in Iran, which is very pro-American and cherishes economic development and growth. They are very unhappy with the situation right now, and hopefully through the sanctions that we've put on, we can push them to push the regime out and to make a change. But we should have jumped on the earlier opportunities, and we need to be on the lookout for those moving forward, because that will, of course, help us prevent going in on a military basis.
30-second rebuttal by Tim.
Real quick, I think the characterization of the president as being insufficiently supportive of Israel, in my view, is unfair. There has, military aid is at its highest level, sharing of intelligence is at its highest level. One of the things I think we have to be careful of is we must remain shoulder to shoulder with Israel, and we must make sure, Israel has some obligations here too. If Israel takes it upon itself, as some are urging in that country, to engage in this surgical strike, we are deluding ourselves if we think Israel can act and it won't impact us. It will. So we must remain united, and we must continue to approach the issue of Iran speaking with one voice, Israel and the United States together.
Some of you may have seen at the Democratic Convention the idea that Jerusalem, and we should recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, was not included in the original plank of the Democratic Party. And I watched the video, and some of you may have as well, where they tried to alter that. They eventually did. They had a floor vote. They had to call it 3 different times, and it is still questionable whether or not, certainly a majority didn't, but even if a plurality supported making that change and acknowledging that Jerusalem should be and is the capital of Israel. And I find it hard to believe that that wasn't included without the president's knowledge and consent. The president's also made other statements talking about Israel having to return to 1967 borders, which in many instances are indefensible. So I don't think he's been nearly as supportive as he should be, and I think Israel's neighbors and others around the world have noticed that distance between the two countries and have tried to exploit it.